Well, thank you for being my guest, Marcy. It's amazing to have you here because, like, from the very first time I met you, your whole life seemed to be existential. You know, and there was so much in just you introducing yourself, who you are, where all of these existential themes popped up. And so I'm really excited to have you here and explore that with you a little bit more. Marcy Boyer, for everybody out there, look her up, fellow existential coach, fellow
Thanks to Yannick.
fellow deep thinker, fellow a passionate writer, much more passionate than I am, which I envy a little bit. And I really like your style, you know, both in terms of writing, but also in terms of how you are, how you think about things. And we've started having long conversations around existential coaching and how they could look like and what people generally go through. So I thought you're an excellent guest on this kind of podcast for just making existential themes more tangible, more relevant, and see how they show up for people. You know, both you as well as your clients, because like you don't just live existentialism, but you also work with it. So we have this lens, and that's why I thought it would be great to just have a conversation, sit down. We brainstormed a bunch of kind of topics, questions that we could talk about potentially. If we get through half of them, I'd be very happy.
I think we got a bit ambitious, but
yeah,
it's
maybe.
a good start. It's a good start.
Yeah, also apologies, I got a bit of the sniffles, and so I think do you, but I think we can manage that. But first of all, maybe you want to introduce yourself just a little bit in terms of who you are, what you're, because you have a rich background in organizations and corporations, but also a rich personal life story. So I just wanted to give you a chance to just kind of say a bit about who you are and what you're passionate about.
Well, I didn't take any notes about that.
Well, I think you have a rich source of...
Well, I probably overwhelmed you the first time that we met. I remember thinking, oh, I can't wait to take this class, this CPD.
Existential coaching.
Yes, and before I had read the description, I had no idea what existentialism really was, heard of it. It was one of those words that you just sort of read or hear about and you think, oh God, I can't deal with that. But then not until I saw the description and then ambushed you a month before the class, and then then during the class all the pieces sort of fit together. And I think that's really where I started to see my life in a different way. I had felt it, wrote a book about all kinds of existential topics, and never knew I was an existentialist.
What I know about jumping.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it
what
was
a great
like,
title.
Yeah, there was like all these light bulbs going off, and I think that the one thing in my life, it's been packed with lots of different experiences.
You said you saw differently as you get in touch with existentialism. Differently how?
Just giving me the words and a framework to place it. So you experience these things, you experience all these, I say I've had sort of 5 or 6 different lives, very different lives. And there's very little similarities between them. But existentialism sort of gave me ways to think about them as one sort of continuous journey, and a lens to look at those things in different pieces and realize how I was experiencing them, each of those lives in a different way, but still in keeping with the framework of existentialism.
Right, so there's one long existence, but when you say different lives, how can we imagine that?
Well, one of the, I guess simplistically, is I grew up, I say this all the time, it's my sort of narrative, is I grew up poor and in a very predominantly black environment, and that was my existence. And
where was that?
In Erie, Pennsylvania. Yeah. And then I moved to New York City, and that sort of was a transition stage. And then I spent 20 years in sort of very middle-class white America in Connecticut, so working for a pharmaceutical company, Pfizer. So I sort of had, the people that I was around, the places that I worked, the interactions that I had were all very different in each of those environments. And then I left all of that, I left the corporate world and started a fair trade business, and I grew dreadlocks and got my nose pierced and sort of broke away from that sort of hamster wheel approach to life. And then I really went kind of off the grid and went to a lot of, travel to developing countries and really put myself 100% into fair trade for 10 years.
Wow, so very different periods of your life that didn't really interconnect much.
No, not at all. I mean, the only interconnection was that being in one place in Connecticut, whether I was at Pfizer or had the fair trade store, there were friends of mine that I knew in both places and that supported us with the business. But how we lived was very different. Leaving when my husband retired, that's when I started the fair trade business, and I started it for 2 years before I left my job. So I didn't just jump, and sort of tested the waters, did a business plan. So it wasn't blindly walking into something, but it was a big jump to leave that salary.
Yeah. Well, what was it? That was the salary. That was the big jump.
Well, the salary gave a big sense of security. When you go from someone else, the best example I can say is when the money just arrives in your bank account. Whether you give yourself 100%, whether you go in every day and just do emails, whatever your performance is, that money's still there, and a lot of it. To every dollar that you pay yourself has to be, you deposit that in the bank.
Right.
So, and you're paying employees, and you're buying stock, and you're balancing all these other things. So
that's a big jump, and that's such a big jump for so many people who come to coaching as well, who would like to quit their 9 to 5 and actually do something that excites them more. But there's this huge risk of not just leaving a paycheck behind, but leaving the security behind, often accepting a lot less money, with the potential of making a lot more, but like to leave behind that certainty of I could become ill and it would still be okay. To like, if I don't work, I don't earn. That's a big,
it's a big jump, and it really redefines who you are, because I can't. It's something that it's like getting married and having children. You can't explain to someone else what it's like to be married or what it's like to be a parent. They have to experience it. You can describe it, you can explain it. It's like jumping into a cold pool of water. That shock.
Yeah, couldn't you like kind of find something that leads up, like for example for parents before they have kids, so it's like, oh, you should have a dog first, to get a little bit of the experience of like taking care of something, feeling the responsibility, because that existentially I'm thinking like that committing to something is already scary, choosing a degree to study, or like committing to a job when actually there could be others out there, or saying yes, I want to be in a relationship with you even though perhaps there could be other people that you're compatible with. It all gives you an experience of, every human being knows what it's like to take over some responsibility. So couldn't you be like, well, if you imagine having a hamster, or like saying yes to a relationship and then multiply it by 100, I wonder if people can prepare for that kind of jump.
No. I don't. I personally, the experience is so profound, because I think the one thing that's different about money is that is our, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Money affects everything on that first level, and so when you're dealing with the basic needs to live, and...
But depends where you live though, no?
Yes, but, when you're... It depends on if you have another source of income. It depends on all sorts of factors.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like the kind of social state. Like for example, I grew up in Germany. If you didn't like, you still have good education or decent education, even if you have no money at all, because the state will pay for it. You get some housing unless you screw things up severely.
Yes, and I think, well, in the States, for instance, I didn't have healthcare for 8 years.
Wow, yeah, it's very different then.
So it's very different. I had a frozen shoulder and couldn't get physical therapy. I had pneumonia, and you know, I sort of worked through it.
Right.
You know, because it would have, you know, if I broke my leg, I could have lost my house.
Yeah.
It is very different, you know, and I think that it still brings up a lot of deep-seated fears that you don't even know you're gonna have if you don't have that sense of security. You know, like, how are you gonna pay your mortgage? Yes, you might have education, but can you pay your electric? Can you, you know, and especially you have a business. I had a physical business that, you know, was costing $5,000 a month just in overheads.
Just to run it, yeah.
Just to run it. That wasn't buying stock. It wasn't, you know, so depends on how big the jump is.
I could still see it, like.
So, no, I mean, yes, every jump is different.
Yeah.
Every jump brings up different fears.
So how do you manage to jump? And so many people don't.
I don't know. I think I asked a friend of mine who I thought of as a mentor, because retail was brutal. Retail was one of the hardest industries to get in. And I said, I went to her complaining, you know, I hadn't paid myself in 2 years and things like that. And I said, why do we do this to ourselves, you know? She goes, because we're crazy. I don't know. I mean, I've always been an experienced junkie.
An experienced junkie?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean?
I guess.
An experienced junkie.
Junkie.
You're junkie for experiences.
Yes, like, I don't know. I guess I've always had something inside of me that if I get an idea, I go with it. If it sticks. If it doesn't stick, I test out lots of things.
Yeah.
I sold knives. I sold Avon. I helped my ex-husband with a graphic design business for 5 years we had. I tried modeling. I've tried, everything. And so...
So novelty.
It's,
New
yeah.
experiences.
Yeah, and I think if it sticks, then, you know, I don't know, I go with it. You know, it's like, so, I don't know. I felt very mission-oriented back then. I think maybe with being in my 30s and...
Like a mission later on, or build something.
Yes, that I wanted to, I had this sort of Buddha moment that I saw my life and I didn't like, you know, where I was going, and I wanted something that gave my life meaning.
Yeah. That's so interesting because, like, on the one hand, it's like, I like experiences, and you experience things in the moment. On the other hand, like, I want to build something, I want to build something more meaningful, I want to take my life to a path where something in the future will mean something, you know, which is also an experience, but it's like, there's a tension there, but also it fits quite well together. Like, some people, they live very much for the moment, some people only live in the future. And do you see yourself as combining that, or how do the two things go together?
Yeah, I thought that if I'm going to have a limited amount of time, I want to do something that that is giving back. And that's been sort of an overarching theme in my life, that I've been fortunate to, you know, work at the company that I did. I had access to a lot of technology and knowledge and training, and especially coming from where I came from, that those things, I didn't want it to be wasted. And so I thought, you know, this is something, at least fair trade for me was, you know, doing something to help, particularly women and children. I worked with a lot of women's cooperatives and giving them the economic power, you know, to make decisions in their lives and things. So I felt very passionate about it.
I find this so interesting because I hear that all the time from people, that it's like, there's this dilemma of, should I do something I enjoy now, or should I, like, park that and do something that I don't enjoy for a later benefit? You know, the kind of marshmallow experiment kind of thing.
But I think you can't serve two masters. I don't know, like, that's what it boiled down to me, because I did enjoy my work at Pfizer, and then I didn't enjoy it. And I always enjoyed, you know, it was both. I enjoyed setting up the business. I enjoyed figuring out. I'm a problem solver.
Mm-hmm.
So I enjoy figuring out all the problems and all the things that you have to do. But I was also thinking about the big picture, but I enjoyed all the little steps in between.
But isn't this where the dilemma comes? When you, for example, and I see that a lot with clients, it's like they're really, like for example, they get to solve problems every day, all day, and they really love that. But at the same time, they're working for a company who they don't really want to support. You know, but their everyday life is great if they were not to think big picture.
Yeah.
If they don't take the time to see what the company is doing and what they're contributing to, they would, if they block that out, they have a very happy existence. But as soon as they allow themselves to see, they're like, oh, I'm not really on board with it. Like the bigger picture doesn't fit.
Yeah.
So that's the two masters I think that you're talking about, and I see them sometimes fighting. I mean, ideally they're in line with each other, but so often
it's the values that come in and that tension between that greater sense of value that you, or meaning of your life.
Yeah. So ideally we serve two masters because they both want the same thing, but like very often they clash.
Yeah. And I think you get to a point where you can't serve them both. And that's what happened with me, you know.
And then you need to decide.
And I had to decide because, you know, I was living very comfortably, you know, very comfortably. And I probably would have had a much longer successful career there. I had a very specialized job, so there weren't a lot of us globally. But it didn't fill my soul with joy.
So what was the catalyst?
The catalyst, I think, was a series of things that led up to that. One was a car accident. One was a 3-car accident in Boston. It's a nightmare driving in Boston. And one was a health scare. And I thought, well, if this is going to be my life, this, you know, if it could potentially end.
So it was a reminder of
It was a
endings.
reminder. Yes.
It's like how that gets us to reconsider how do I live my life. Right?
Yes, because I enjoyed my job on the day-to-day. I enjoyed working, you know, my co-workers were great. But the politics and being in an office every day, you know, I was on phone conferences 6 hours a day because I worked with sites all over. I mean, I had a very globally focused position, highly specialized. I was a troubleshooter, so everything was difficult, challenging, meeting deadlines that couldn't be missed, that dollars were being counted if I missed a deadline. Making sure like the plumbing was all working, the document management systems.
But these endings are existentially such a powerful reminder, right? I don't know anybody who's had a near-death experience or a reminder or a health scare or even a round birthday, like these more or less powerful reminders of, oh, I don't have forever. You know, my life could actually end any moment. Or now I'm halfway through, or the new quarter life crisis at around 25. And then people are like, most people, like everybody I know who's had a serious like near-death thing, an accident or something like that, they all changed their lives for the better by their standards. You know, they either work on a project that's meaningful to them, or they work less and spend more time with the family. Like wherever their values lied, they've been more true to that. At least for a period of time until some of them slip back into their old
and it's like a wake-up call. You know, it's like a major wake-up call, but you can't, it is very difficult to sustain it for a long period of time until you sort of, you know, have another wake-up call.
This is so interesting because like for example, Buddhist monks, they regularly meditate on their own death. And that's one of those reminders. I've seen an intervention where you write your own obituary. Or you imagine yourself at your funeral and what people would say about you. You know, either in the speeches or when they talk to each other, you know, to kind of very vividly put that reminder of endings, of death, of I don't have forever to do what I like or what is meaningful to me. And that releases something. But there's also, I wonder what you think about that. I had this thought experiment where I thought, wouldn't it be amazing or potentially really useful or potentially really unethical, but like to every, let's say, 7 to 12 years, remind a loved one, or like trick a loved one into thinking that they're going to be dying.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, bribe a doctor or something and
Oh man, that's
have them
cruel.
or like, I don't know, go on a parachute jump and like have the instructor pretend the chute doesn't open or something like that. You know, so
yeah.
I'm not sure because like, I mean, you would have to make sure that they don't just take all of their money and move to Hawaii.
Yeah.
Or they rob a bank or
But I
something.
think we can do that for ourselves. I mean...
Can we though? Can we trick ourselves? I mean, we can imagine, but like, it's not really the real experience, right?
I don't know. I think maybe if I think there's an element of the right timing about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and life gives us those timings. I mean, it seems like, you know, every few years we have a major death in our family. You know, every 5 to 10 years you lose a parent, or
I've been quite lucky in that
oh,
regard.
you've been okay, or some other thing that might come up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it doesn't have to be necessarily a death, but I think life gives you those opportunities, and it's our wokeness, if you will, and taking, you know, that step to look at it that way.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, something tells me it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of understanding, I think, to put yourself through that, or to like, because I see a lot of people when life offers that kind of invitation to look and become aware that you don't have forever.
Yeah.
I what I see is a lot of people that just look the other way, or they distract themselves, or they go on a drink, or they take drugs, or they throw themselves into work. A lot of people that don't take the time to sit in that emotion and that anxiety, and it's like, you know, to like existential coaching I see as a space where people can dare to look into the void and look at this human condition and that it's going to end. In my experience, most people, or more people than do, they don't want to face it.
No.
Even though it would be very useful and valuable, it's very uncomfortable.
It is.
To allow yourself to see that there's an end, because they're a great motivator, but at the same time they're uncomfortable.
And that was my
Hence
first
the
topic.
tricking.
Well, that was the first thing that I had on the list, is why it sucks to be an existential coach. Because of that exact reason. I mean, the first reason is no one really knows what existential is, and then they definitely don't really understand. Many people aren't aware of what existential coaches do, and trying to, you know, put it in a tagline is almost impossible.
It's quite complex. It's difficult to just put a frame around it.
Yeah.
Because it can be so many things, right? And you have to really tune in with a person.
And there's so many areas that you can focus on. You know, you think about how big life is.
Yeah.
But I think that is the crux of why it is so difficult, because I think that very few people willingly want to go to, I don't even, the void, whatever you want to call it, that edge, and it's usually something that happens, a trigger. I don't think we want to go. It's like saying, do I want to chop off my, you know, finger and feel that pain for the sake of feeling the pain? We don't willingly
not so much chop off, it's more like opening to look inside, you know, and then you know it's going to be stronger afterwards, but you know it's going to be a painful process.
It's going to be, and we avoid pain.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's the thing. I think that's the crux of it, is that it is really difficult to go there willingly.
To look and be aware. And I feel it's useful to kind of distinguish between like existential coaching as like you zoom in on these big existential questions. What am I here for? What is it like to be human? Like, how can I make a right decision in the face of a dilemma or like a scenario where it's difficult to decide? Like, how can I embrace this uncertainty? You know, how can I make decisions that might lead me to failure? You know, or like, how can I choose to go forward without knowing any of the answers? So some of this existential exploration of the big questions, they require you to look at some uncomfortable truths about life and about yourself. And this is where the uncomfortable part of existential coaching is. So this is like existential coaching, zooming into those existential questions. I think then there's a lot of coaching that is informed by an existential worldview. by an understanding of like the human condition, and that it's difficult to be anxiety free. It's impossible to never feel any tension just because we're human. But then we can work in so many different ways as a coach, knowing or being informed by the philosophy. And then it can be a very performance and outcome focused process. You know, it doesn't have to be super uncomfortable, but I guess a coach like you work right in the existential theme. You know,
Yes.
I do have some of those clients, like a lot of my other clients, they don't go dive into the void. And I think this is what you're really passionate about, and me too. But it doesn't have to be like that, so I just don't want to throw people off. Like,
no.
But
And it's usually not, they don't come to us and say, I want to go stare in the void.
yeah, that'd be kind of cool though.
No. But it quickly gets there.
Uh-huh.
Because it's like a string, the string, you know, it's I'm unhappy with my life. I'm lonely. I'm procrastinating.
Uh-huh.
So it's all of those small, seemingly small things
Yeah.
that when you start to just pull a string,
Uh-huh.
you get very quickly into, and you know, this is the big thing in coaching right now, you know, the difference between therapy and coaching. You quickly get to, I would say, unhealed or unresolved issues, used in my experience, in my clients, about who we are as people, our sense of identity, how these things affected how I see myself. If, like, for instance, you know, I don't want to use my clients' examples, but using my own example, my mother viewed me as, you know, this, I was supposed to do great things. I was expected that my life was a gift and I wasn't supposed to be here. So all this pressure was put on me to do amazing things. So most of my life I spent feeling like a failure.
You weren't supposed to be there.
Yeah, well, you know.
Because I know, but like,
yeah, the abortion
our listeners
story.
might
Yeah.
not know.
Being an abortion survivor, knowing that my mother lived in a time where races didn't mix. It wasn't acceptable to have a white parent with a black child. And so she was pressured, forced, you know, into having an abortion before it was made legal, and the abortion didn't work. And then I was viewed as a miracle.
Yeah.
And accepted by both sides of my family. And but being a miracle put a massive amount of pressure.
Yeah.
So I pushed myself to do everything until I crashed. And I think that's where I get with my clients. So my clients might come to me about they can't lose weight. Why can't they lose weight? Everything they've done doesn't work, or they haven't been able to finish this project that they've been working on.
Yeah.
They just can't find the motivation.
So interesting how those
And
the
it's just-
smaller problems, like the mundane everyday issues, they are an opening into
Yeah.
what's underneath the surface, right? And there's the big question sitting there.
And that's where I think the power that existential coaching has, and the tools and the framework and all those other things, you know, the lens that we look through, that we can go to those levels to understand how do you see yourself as a person.
Yeah.
And it's that self-talk, those,
Yeah.
those little scripts that we say over and over. We don't even know we're saying them.
Yeah.
That's why we can't finish. You know, I couldn't drive.
Yeah.
I came here to this country and I couldn't drive. I every time I got behind a steering wheel, I've been driving 29 years or something ridiculous, and I just break out in a sweaty panic. Anxiety. I drink tons of that calming, you know, elixir. I forgot what it's called, and it didn't help. And it wasn't until I realized that, you know, my sense of identity, my sense of purpose, had been basically pulled out from underneath me. You know, having just being an immigrant and starting all over, and it affected my confidence. It affected everything. So I think our clients aren't going to come to us and say, let's talk about death and let's talk about being alone.
No, but like what they present, what they introduce into the coaching room are an opening into having those kind of conversations.
Exactly.
At least we can offer them, you know, because I had it sometimes that clients came and I could sense there's more to this, and then when I kind of inquired and got a bit curious about what's going on there, I could see some connections, but when I reflected them back, or when I like offered what I saw, what I heard, and being a bit curious, it just didn't go there. You know, and that was something that I had to learn, that not everybody wants to go deep.
No.
Or they might need a bit longer to kind of build that relationship and build that trust until they feel they can open up. But like, we can only ever invite somebody to look a little bit further, to look a little bit deeper. And some take it and some don't. And I think that's useful to know as a coach, that we can only ever invite somebody in. I know some coaches, they're a lot more aggressive. They're like, they see a little opening, like, and they rip somebody open to make them look at the stuff on their insides, and then somebody sits there with their insides out, and they're like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? And it's powerful in the sense of that word. But like, I also think we need to be very careful when we open somebody up, because if somebody makes a little incision and we go straight in, like, that can be really dangerous.
Yes.
So we need to, like, I don't know, how do you experience that?
I don't know, because most of the time I don't say much at all. That's the beauty. I love that part of coaching. It's being silent, giving people that space to, and they come up with it.
Right.
And it's the one or two questions. You know, you feel that little tug on that string, and you just ask that question. Right.
So the people who come to you, they want to explore and they're ready, and
they're ready.
You just need to create that space where they feel safe to do that.
Yes. And
supported by some of those questions that just offer to go a little bit deeper.
And they're very simple questions. And
could you give an example?
Oh.
Within confidentiality, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the questions will come from parenting, you know, and asking why, you know, just not why, no, why, but how did that make you feel when you're your parent, or how do you feel that applies to you now?
Yeah, such a powerful
question. And it's so simple, and that is because we're carrying all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's usually our parents, you know, like for me it was my mother, and her death brought it all up, you know, so to the point where I had to look at it and really hold it out there. Yeah. And so when we, you know, we ask these questions and letting that space happen, and then asking the one or two questions.
Right.
And then it just, and then the other thing I do is most of myself included, when I was a coaching client, I spent 2 months crying.
Wow.
Just crying through these issues. And
quite an intense coaching journey.
Yes, and most of my clients it's the same way, you know, and you know, people apologize, and it is the most beautiful thing is to get that out, you know, and we're not going back reliving it, but how it applies to how you see yourself today.
Yeah.
You know, that's where I think the difference with therapy and coaching is, what are you carrying here in this space that needs to be resolved, and how are you going to resolve it to move forward?
And this is so super interesting. Like, this is also why it sucks to be an existential coach. In speech marks, obviously, because it's amazing, but like, it's much more complex than other forms of coaching or other approaches to coaching, because the boundaries are just so blurred. And I mean, you just spoke about the boundaries. Like, when does it become therapy? Yeah. And it's just such a gray area. It's not very well defined. You know, sometimes I sit there and I listen to the story, and I'm tuning in and I'm listening and I'm being with it and I'm being empathetic. Like, there's no difference between that and therapy. So often coaching is very therapeutic, but like, we haven't really set the boundaries well as a profession.
Yeah.
Because coaching is such a huge umbrella term for something that is like instructional sports coaching. This is how you have to swing your arm in tennis or live your life to be happy. to like all the other end of the spectrum where it's pretty much indistinguishable from psychotherapy.
Yeah.
So we cover such a broad range of experiences when you're human, which is what attracted me to it.
Yeah.
But it certainly makes it more difficult to handle the space, because you need to decide at what point might it be more useful to work with somebody else, you know, and that is for me, it's always been fascinating. It's one of the most valuable points about existential coaching, but also makes it so much more difficult to hold the space, because inside I'm asking myself all of these questions all the time, you know.
I guess I should think about it. Maybe it's out of not knowing really much about therapy. I mean, I went to a therapist a few times with postpartum depression, and it wasn't much different than what I'm doing now. The only there was some differences, is because she did give me advice. She did say, "I think you're doing this."
Right.
Whereas I would never, in coaching we don't do that.
I think you're doing this, or I think you should be doing this.
I think you might be doing this.
So like an interpretation.
An interpretation.
Yeah.
Because she told me basically that when I looked in the mirror, I was seeing the ghetto girl. That's my old self. I wasn't seeing this professional, and she told me that.
Yeah.
And it took me years to stop disagreeing with her. But in coaching, obviously, we don't do that. So I do think there is.
You'd be surprised.
Well, I don't do that.
I don't do that either.
No.
But there's plenty of coaches that.
Yeah. I mean, that's not my job to interpret. My job is.
I think that's very powerful, because it empowers the other person to make their own interpretations.
Yeah.
We can only offer what we see, right?
And that's why I like the.
But isn't that an interpretation already?
So
So difficult to be clean about it, no?
It is, but I try to, it might be, or what do you think?
Yeah.
Does this feel like?
Yeah.
What does this feel like to you?
Yeah.
I really stick with the feeling. How does this feel for you? That's one of my favorite questions, because it's not my job to interpret. I use metaphors, to reflect. I use a lot of metaphors, but I really, that's not my thing, because I really am conscious of that. I try to be.
That's also so interesting about existentialism, is that we always relate, right? We always see ourselves through the eyes of the other person, and that's why sometimes we have so many different identities of like me at work, seen through the eyes of our colleagues, me at home through the reactions I get from my family, me in my circle of friends and mates, like
that social world.
Yeah, we all always are in relation to the world, to others, and also to ourselves.
Yeah.
So this is how we navigate the world, and it's so interesting how we think we build a sense of identity, of like, who am I? But it's so influenced and so intricately linked with other people.
It is, and I think that's where my coaching has gone too, is that we talked about this whole big life experience, all the experiences that we can have in life, and all the relationships, but I kind of honed into the relationship with ourselves. Because I think if we can understand that, and I don't think it's about getting it right. Because
what does it even
mean? But understanding ourselves, what does that mean? When we hear this voice in the back of our mind, what does that mean to me?
Yeah.
And that's kind of all not all, obviously, but either my clients have come to me, have similarities because they've been attracted to me because of my background, but that's kind of what I focus on, is that relationship with yourself, and then interacting with other people.
Although that question, like, I mean, we laughed about it, but like, how do I get it right is a really valid question, isn't it?
We can't.
Well, I guess depends who you ask, right? Right. I mean, I'd like to.
Well, what is right?
Yeah. What is right for you is the more important question, right?
Yeah.
But isn't that answerable? Isn't that at least a valid question to pursue? Because it's a very different sense. Like you can say you can't get it right, and then you stop chasing success. But if you say, for me, a good person is that, has those kind of values, does these kind of behaviors,
Yeah.
and then you have something to strive towards. You know, it's like if you have a vision of what a good life is, you can model that, right? Wouldn't that be a good life?
I don't like those words, good and right.
Well,
I think it's what's right for you at that moment. That's what I think. And I think getting away from the judgment about what's right and wrong, because a lot of times we beat ourselves up. And I don't know if there's a gender difference between men and women. Most of my clients have been women recently. And using those words right and good really mean different things, I think, between the sexes.
Right.
And the conditioning that we've had. And I think it's more about right for you at this moment.
Yeah.
Being allowed to express yourself.
Yeah.
Being angry, allowing yourself to be angry.
Yeah.
Giving yourself permission to set boundaries. To do what feels right in that way, for you at that moment.
Yeah, so
which could be different in the next moment.
Yeah, so there's not a universal right.
Yeah.
But without, like, there's a right for a specific person at a specific time.
Yes.
And that might change.
And it could change. I mean, in my book, I said right and wrong are like an old pair of shoes that might still look good, but they don't fit anymore. Because as we change, what we thought was right for us back then, or what we thought was a good life for ourselves, 20 years ago, could be completely 20 years down the line.
Yeah, and this is so interesting because like there's so many people who tell you there's a universal morally right. Like Sam Harris, for example, has been arguing for like a universal morality. And I never quite got that, or maybe I just disagree because like it seems to me from my work, it seems to be so individual. Like I always say, for everything that you believe is right and like good and righteous, there'll be one person at least in the world who thinks you're a despicable human being for even considering that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously you shouldn't go, we should not kill each other. I mean, there's...
But even that, like, if you look at some Amazonian tribes, in like hundreds of years ago, like there was completely normal to at some point butcher every man, woman and child from the neighboring tribe. Yeah. Just because that meant survival, and obviously if it helps you survive, it's a good thing to do. So depending who you ask, I mean, there are some people who say, look, there's too many people, like we're human beings, we're always going to kill each other, like survival of the fittest, like we're an aggressive species, and that's why it's normal to kill other people. And I can philosophically see where that kind of person might come from, and to some extent it's difficult to argue with somebody like that depending on their philosophical and epistemological stance, But I don't think that way. I think killing is wrong. I think most people will have an emotional reaction to killing something, but I know there's people who don't have that because they just got desensitized.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure about universal morals.
No, I don't know either. I mean, I guess I haven't spent enough time out in that space sort of thinking about it. This is I didn't come from a philosophical background. I came more from a life experience background and wedged myself into existentialism.
But this is perfect because we're exactly trying to make these kind of connections, because like if you go to the absolute extreme and you're like killing is wrong or maybe not for everybody, but these are extreme examples, but if we put them to like everyday examples, like you might say, look, lying is wrong. Yeah. Or like, for example, I don't know, making somebody look bad at work so that you can get the promotion. That's a wrong thing.
I think that in the way I've sort of done it in my coaching is asking people to reflect upon how they interpret that themselves. And then understanding why they, drilling down to the benefit of it. And being accepting of their answers. And it usually leads to a revelation of some sort and a change. a healing of a wound that they didn't know they had. You know, that will then allow them to see it differently. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the other part why it sucks to be an existential coach sometimes, because sometimes I talk to somebody and they arrive at this worldview and this set of values that is difficult for me to accept, because I disagree on what's right and wrong to some extent.
Yeah.
Like, if you meet somebody and I'm like, I don't think you're a good person, you know, out on the street, like, but they're maybe, I don't know, it's a friend or a colleague, and you're like, but you're still going to be working together, and you have to just accept that other people do things differently.
Yeah.
Even on the same team, like, for example, if a work colleague or a friend has like a different way of doing things to what you would have done, so the outcome might be the same, but you're like, I know my way is better, but then you just have to accept that other people do things differently. And sometimes that can be really difficult to accept.
Well, that's what I would say to you if you were my client is, you know, I know I'm not supposed to use why, but, you know, why does that affect you? How is that making you feel when they do that? Yeah. So then I'd start to explore, you know, that feeling of you thinking it's wrong, or what is it triggering?
Yeah, and then you get to know each other
then
better,
you get to know
yourself better.
So it's then, once we understand what we're feeling inside, then it will be easier to let someone else do something differently, accepting of it.
Yeah.
Because if we don't know why it's affecting us, you know, what's the subcontext? That's what I say to my clients. What's behind that feeling?
Yeah.
You know, and keep going back to the root.
Yeah, because feelings are such a good compass, or like a pointer there, like an invitation to explore some of your values.
Yeah, your values, your beliefs, your expectations, your judgments, all of that.
Because,
and so, oops, sorry.
Yeah, no, just like, when we feel very strongly, there's some core value has been touched on, you know, positively or negatively.
Something, yeah.
But like every strong emotion, like we try to make negative or uncomfortable emotions. They're not negative.
No.
But when we feel uncomfortable, we try to make it go away. And when our clients feel uncomfortable, the temptation or the urge is to make them feel better. Mm-hmm. But like existentially, it's really useful to sit in that emotion and explore it. Why am I feeling this way?
Yeah.
Sit in that for a little bit, and then you might figure out why you're feeling this way, because then you start realizing and understanding how you interpret the world.
Yeah.
You know, something has happened, and now I'm feeling like this. What's behind that? It's because I think that was really unfair, and then you see a pattern where unfairness triggers you, and then you get angry, or you get annoyed or frustrated. And it's like, next time, you know how you're going to react. You know, then you can decide what to do, be more in charge of your emotions, be more in charge of yourself.
Yeah.
And get to know yourself, where you have that sense of strong identity. And you can say, this is what I stand up for. And then you can say, well, what do I want to build in my life? Maybe it's something around fairness, because I know that's going to make me have a sense of meaning and purpose. And all of these puzzle pieces come together.
Yeah.
That's why this exploration, as long as it takes, is so useful. It could change the rest of your life. Just because you had that one emotion and you chose to explore it rather than make it go away.
They make it, we don't make things go away.
You in your work.
Yeah, I mean, if you had to say what existential coaching was, is, you know.
Not the best tagline, is it?
But I think, I don't know. I'm an internal optimist. I don't know. Or I have this hopeful gene, you know, if you will, that I think somewhere within our subconscious, we're ready, you know, we come to coaching ready to deal with that. At least my clients have.
Yeah.
And maybe it's my marketing, maybe it's all of those things, but they're usually ready, you know, to kind of go there. And every session, you know, we start to unpick these. That uncomfortableness gets lessen and lessen and lessen. And then, you know, after 6 or 8 sessions, it's like, you know, they are like, this made me feel like this, and you know, we develop a language, we've been able to develop a way to interpret that, or for them to interpret it, and so then it's great. You know, The other thing that I think is really important is, and I do this a lot with my clients, is sometimes we don't understand it. We don't know why. We can't verbalize it. We, whatever that belief is, that core value that's been so deeply buried, but we can feel it. So I explore the feeling and just sit with the feeling. What does it feel like in your body? What part of your body does it feel? Describe it. And in coaching, how we have that technique where you I guess I kind of think of it as phenomenological inquiry, but in a visual way. In a, what does it look like? What shape does it have? What's the intensity? But just on that feeling.
Explore the phenomenon, the experience.
The experience of it inside of our bodies. And even though we may not understand what that value is, or that belief, or that judgment, or some other thing, or distortion, or whatever it is that's there, verbally, or the language, we can release it. And it's very powerful. I mean, usually around this is what usually happens. Three sessions in, we're talking. And once we're done thinking about it, then we can go into this feeling about it.
Right.
And then I do a guided feeling, and I just basically say, what does it feel like? Describe it. Does it have a color? Does it have a shape? What's the intensity? Where is it in your body? Where is it now? And it gets, usually we get smaller and moves, and then when they're done, their whole physical body has changed. By the end of the session, people that have come in that have physically looked worn and tired, and my daughter said something really cool today. She said that the gravity of life weighing you down. Like that gravity of life, of living, experiencing life, they leave uplifted. And we don't even have to know what it is. So that's why I do love coaching, because we're not here to try to go back and solve.
Where do you think that lifting feeling comes from? Because I guess a lot of people would be concerned that if you start talking about these things and you start allowing yourself to see into the void, that some people find it difficult to then not see it anymore. Like all this awareness around, maybe there is no right, and maybe I'll never find out, and maybe I can't have any certainty, and maybe there is no overarching meaning to life. I think a lot of people would be concerned that once they start looking, it would actually weigh them down more rather than lift something off.
I think, again, in my experience, I haven't done that physical aspect until we've talked about it, and we've sort of run out of thinking about it. And so
first you kind of empty what's in your head.
All in the head, because I don't think, in my opinion, this is my experience, in my own personal experience, that we can't think our way out of our problems. And that's why, I use the tagline, experience life. Because I do think there is an experiential phenomenon that's occurring. So all the things that, our mind and our feeling body are two separate bodies in some ways. They're connected, but the way we access them is different. So oftentimes, like I said, 3 or 4, maybe 5 sessions in, and we got it all out of the head. Then it's now, so when I say they're uplifted, it's like we've hit this end of this road talking about it, and now it's like
now we're experiencing
it. And I do different ones depending on, everyone is different, so every guided coaching session will be different. Some people, we go to, I ask them, where are they? So we're talking, sometimes
it's a guided coaching session.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
I'm a Reiki master. I told you that before. And in Reiki, you really do a lot of guided meditations. And you go and meet spirit guides. And although I don't live in that world per se anymore, like I wouldn't say that I am spiritual, but I don't live in the spiritual world. I live in this world where I am right now. But I think that the techniques and the getting in touch with those things, using those guided meditations, I call them guided coaching sessions. You know, it's...
What would they guide you towards? Because when I hear guide, I'm always thinking like somebody takes you by the hand and gets you somewhere.
I ask them what they, you know, it depends on the session.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's breaking through something, I might say, what does this issue look like to you? And then they describe it. So it might be a rock that they can't pass. I don't give them the guidance. I just ask them to visualize it. And they will usually give me a symbol. If it's a feeling, I might ask, how does it feel in your body?
Yeah. So it sounds like more of a fellow traveler, like not somebody who like pulls you somewhere, but somebody who's next to you and asking you to imagine things going forward, but not really guiding them into a certain direction.
No, maybe that's not the right. The only thing I'm guiding is asking the questions.
Okay.
And try to keep it as open as possible.
Uh-huh.
You know, I might ask, so when I'm guiding, it's asking questions about what does it look like, how do you describe it, how does it feel?
Yeah, but they would bring the it.
They would bring the it.
Oh, right.
If it's an issue, they're bringing what it looks like outside to them externally.
Yeah, and I've heard some people describe guidance like that. Because like, I think this is like, I mean, it's a terminology thing, but like, I think it's important because too many coaching clients, they expect you to take them, not just take them by the hand, but take them by the hand to lead them somewhere. Which is often what a guide would do. Like you would go on holiday and you would get a guide, so the guide shows you all the best spots and takes you there. You know? And this kind of guidance is more like you're still there by the hand, you know, you're still next to them, you're traveling with them, but you're not. They know where the sites are. You just ask them what the site.
Describe it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So they would discover the holiday destination. But not because you show them the best spots, but because they go and you help them explore what they're interested in.
Yeah.
You know, you wouldn't say, I know a great museum, you would say, what do you like doing? And then they would describe that curiosity and that love for art, you know.
What do you call that then?
I call it a fellow traveler because I love Yalom's, I think Yalom called it fellow traveler once, and I really like that metaphor that you're traveling with somebody.
Yeah.
Like you're sitting on the passenger seat and you might ask them what they're interested in and help them explore and like figure out where they would drive, but you wouldn't say, hey, turn right here and then take a left and I know a good spot.
I mean, the only thing I would say is that I do plan, if it depending on the issue, not plan, is if it's a physical sensation in the body. Then that's where we'll go. You know, if it's an issue, sometimes it's an issue that we can't resolve, then I might ask what that issue looks like outside the body.
Yeah.
You know?
So you're guiding the process by tuning into the experience and the emotion, and you know that works by figuring out what the path is. But you wouldn't choose the path.
No.
You would just choose the process to get to an answer of which path to take.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I sort of melded all sorts of different things together.
Yeah, but again, this is like, existentially, this is so much about responsibility, right? Because if you take somebody by the hand, if that holiday guide would tell you, I'm going to take you to 3 museums, and you don't like either of them, then the guide is responsible for having picked the wrong museums. But if somebody asks you what you're interested in, and then helps you to find the right path, or maybe they have some interesting suggestions of what you might like, but ultimately it's your decision where to go.
Yeah.
Then the guide isn't the one responsible for how you live your life.
And that along that same lines is, I think it's much more powerful because the images that they choose, or the places, sometimes we'll say, where are you? Usually, if it's an issue outside, I'll say, where are you now?
Yeah.
What do you see? And the things that they choose have meaning to them, which is much more powerful.
Yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
than me saying, well, let's imagine you're in the garden, you know, because that might not appeal to them. That might not have any meaning to them. But, and then they reflect on it because they've seen it, they've created it, and they've made that meaning.
And they can own it.
And they own it, and they can interpret all these other things from that.
I really like, the more we're talking about it, I really like the holiday metaphor.
Yeah.
Because like, if you get a guide on a holiday and they get you to like the tourist spots and you come back from holiday, and you're probably not gonna, one of those destinations that you're not gonna be likely to come back to after like going halfway around the world, you know, spending quite some cash to get there and not having that much. You would like, okay, I only have that one holiday.
Yeah, yeah.
You only have that one life.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to come home from holiday and be like, oh, the guide really screwed up. It wasn't
you want
really what I
things
wanted
that
to
mean
see.
something to you.
Yeah, but like if you go on holiday and you pick the spots that you want to be in and you pick the experiences, you might come back home and be like, maybe I could have made more out of my holiday if I would have picked the guide to show me the best spots. But it wouldn't have been my holiday. It's like a holiday that somebody else chose for me.
Yeah, yeah.
And what I find so interesting about it is that plenty of people, they are completely okay with that. They actually prefer not to take the responsibility. They book an all-inclusive, they book a tour, and then somebody else makes all the decisions where to go, and they don't have to make any decisions because every choice creates anxiety.
Yeah, yeah.
If you choose that one museum, you could have not seen the other.
Yeah.
You know, if you pick that one lunch spot, you're not gonna go to the one next
That
door,
fear of
which
missing out.
might have been a lot better. You know,
Yeah.
if you don't book the guide, then you make your own experiences. They might be much better, but they might be worse, and you'll never find out.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
existentially, this puts so much pressure on people because that fear of missing out, or that like, well, you own your decisions.
Yeah.
But some people don't like to have the courage to make those decisions. They just book the all-inclusive, they come back home, and they're happy with that choice. They don't want to take responsibility.
And that's one of my other things I listed here is why it sucks to be an existential coach. Because it requires the clients to have courage.
Yes.
It requires courage. I mean, there's no way existential, I think, coaching will work if you don't have at least one foot into the courage. Doesn't mean you have to have the courage for everything.
Then you need to go get a consultant, and like the traditional understanding of a consultant as somebody who consults, who gives you a way forward that they have created based on what they've explored with you.
Yeah.
You know, and then you just pay somebody to give you some answers, and then you apply that.
And I think sometimes the courage comes from not necessarily people saying I have courage, but knowing they don't want to be where they are anymore.
Yeah.
So a courage from they can't take this anymore.
Yeah.
So that's what I say.
Yeah.
Like, sick and tired. When you're sick and tired and you can't take it anymore,
Then you change things, right?
It does give you courage.
But that's kind of that's not really courage. That's like giving into the need to react to the pain.
But it can give you that first step into courage.
Oh yeah, of course.
And that's all we need is that first step. I'm not saying people have to have enough courage to go, you know, like Lord of the Rings, one of my favorite movies too, is, you know, when he went up to throw the ring and in the pit of fire.
Yeah.
We're not asking people to have the courage. I don't ask people to have the courage to go to that edge of that fire. I'm saying be Frodo and say, I'm going to take the first step. You know, Frodo found his courage as he was going along. And I think it requires just one first step of courage.
Yeah, that's a super pragmatic example as well of like, if you think about the final outcome, it's really difficult to make that step and commit to it.
Yeah.
But you can commit to the first step.
Yeah.
But like, it takes some idea of knowing which direction you're going to go in. Because otherwise you might have taken a step in the wrong direction.
And
that's
you
why I
never
think
know.
people struggle with commitment.
Yeah, and then you don't know where the journey's going to go. But I think, you know, it could be 10 different destinations.
Yeah.
Most of the time, clients that I have my experience come to me and they want to do X.
Yeah.
You know, it's not necessary. That's why I don't do performance coaching.
Right.
I'll never be a performance coach. Because I'm not good at that. I'm not good at helping you get from A to Z. I'm going to get you from A to A. And you figure out Z later, because it's important. For me, it's about the journey into to your relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
And then if you have that,
but if it's a new relationship with yourself and you feel differently, for me that's a B. There's a
Yes.
you might have not done things differently. Like
Maybe
always
it's
one of my first clients that I've led through a proper journey. From the outside, nothing had changed really because
Yeah.
they were still doing the same job that they didn't like.
I guess it's in a performance standpoint. You know, if you're saying, you know, what is that? I don't even remember what that the basic coaching model. What is that
Grow.
model? Grow. The grow model. You know, identify your resources. What do you want? What are your steps you're going to take? Things like that. And physically, you might not have gone anywhere.
But see, for me, I don't see grow as a performance model.
Yeah.
It can be very neatly applied as such.
Yeah.
Grow being the G for first you talk about the goal and where you want to move to.
Opportunities.
Then you talk about the reality, where are you now? Basically, what's your B, what's your A, and then obstacles, opportunities, how could you get there? And way forward, what are you actually going to do in order to get there? But like for me, going from A to B, it doesn't have to be a performance or a behavior or a new habit or an outcome. It can also be a relationship to yourself and your sense of identity and authenticity. It could be developing a mindset rather than a set of behaviors. It's
but
like
nothing
a
in your
feeling
life
that you
might
create.
not have changed. That's what I meant, sort of like.
But everything has changed. Like the client.
Yeah.
From the outside, you see him do the same job.
Yeah.
But if you talk to him, you know,
it's
he's
totally
like,
different person.
I chose to be here rather than feeling I have to be here and be stuck. It changes everything.
Yeah.
Even, just not from the outside, looking in for a snap second.
Yeah.
You know, so that's, I think, too many people in coaching think performance and solutions focused when actually often the solution just happens within.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we're existential coaches.
That's also why it sucks, because it's much harder to measure that.
Yeah.
And to like put a number to it.
Yeah. You can. I mean, I don't know. It's just. It is one of those things that it's so hard to explain to people.
Well, what's your best couple of sentences to explain existential coaching, or existentialism even?
Oh, I don't know off the top of my head. I wrote some notes down here.
If I were to ask you as a client, it's like, existential coaching? What's that?
Oh, I
We'll
know I
just
have
start
something
there.
on my website. I mean, I think that it's all about how. I mean, you know, it's this basic things. How do we live in the world? How do we see ourselves? How do we experience life, and how do we then use that information? You know, now I'm getting very technical, but use that information to make decisions. It affects everything else, you know. So it's dealing with the big life things and then using that information to do life.
Yeah. There's a lot about the big questions, right?
Yeah.
And for me, the big questions are always under the surface of many of the small questions. So somebody might get stuck on choosing what they're going to have for lunch or what they're going to wear today. And there'll be so many questions, like bigger questions
that
underneath that kind of question. And if you start to explore those, a lot of the mundane, smaller questions, they become more obvious. You know, and that allows us to resolve a countless number of questions, of smaller questions, if we address some of the big ones.
And I think that's the thing I have on the, you know, when I sat down and write the website, I said it goes deeper for lasting changes.
Right.
Because I think once you get to those deeper levels of how do you see yourself, your sense of, what is it, this, your concept of self, not just your identity, but your concept of self, and picking all your relationship with yourself, the self-talk, all of those things that's there, then I think that you're more likely, you know, lasting changes, that's what I say. Because we've sort of, you know, it's not superficial. I don't know. It's impossible to explain it to people because it's so massive. It's like, what is life?
You're not alone. In the last good couple of weeks, I've had a few crowds that I talk to about coaching or about existentialism, positive psychology. A lot of coaches, and the coaching groups. I've always asked, who here has a sentence or two ready to go to explain what coaching is? They didn't have to present it, they didn't have to speak in front of a group, but just who has a sentence or two to define what their coaching is?
Yeah.
And like, one person started speaking once, but out of the 3-4 times that I've done that, not a single hand went up.
Wow.
I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
I would have at least like expected somebody to recite a Whitmore reference or something. You know, like coaching is this, or like I help people like that to avoid or achieve this kind of thing through a process of this.
Yeah.
And
well, I mean, I know
most
what
people
my
don't have that.
area is, but it's hard to say to people, I work in the area of self-worth. That's really value and meaning about how we feel about ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, unpicking all of those things. Basically, my job isn't to convince people to love themselves, but to remove the reasons why they don't.
Right.
Once we sort of have that, pulling those apart, then it's like it works itself. I don't know. I mean, there's so many taglines that anyways, you're killing me with this question. That's why it sucks. It sucks. Because it's impossible to explain.
Yeah, well...
But you know what? You feel it. I think when I picked the coach that I worked with, what was it, 3 years ago now? 3 years ago. A year before I started training. I did this massive 4 months of coaching, very intense.
is that the first coach you had that you described it?
Yeah.
See, for me, that's a therapist.
yeah, it was very intense. And what was the point I was trying to make now?
Do you feel it?
The words were there, but it was the feeling that the words gave me that I knew it was the right coach for me. And that's what I think some of my clients have said to me, is that whatever words that I use on the website, it's how they interpret it through their, it's my story, it's the things that I've written about experiencing life, lasting changes. You get it without getting it. Do you know what I mean?
But isn't it the same about life? Like there is no answer for what's a good or not life, but like you kind of feel it when it's right, no?
Yeah, and I think that's what happens. Yeah. I don't have any words. I thought about rewriting all of my things on my website and to try to explain it better, but I think you get it.
It's funny when I think about life on a whole as well. Well, sometimes it doesn't quite feel right, but you know you're doing the right thing. Kind of leads back to, am I experienced, focused, in the present? Or am I holding back and do something that I perhaps not enjoy so much and it doesn't quite feel right? Because when you say feel right, it could also be uncomfortable, but it feels right.
Yes.
But when you say it feels right, for most people, what they hear is it feels good and positive and pleasant.
It feels like this is where I need to be.
And I think this is one of the key things in existentialism that I think is important to be out there. It feeling right, it being right, doesn't necessarily mean it's pleasant.
No.
And I think it's important that people understand that a good life doesn't necessarily mean a pleasant one.
No.
Certainly not all the time, because that shit's impossible.
No, and a meaningful life isn't going to be pleasant.
Not all the time, but that feeling of meaning when you go to bed and you're like, I'm doing the right thing here, even though most of my day was like really challenging and difficult. I'm living well, I'm living good, like I'm doing the right thing. And that's such a subjective thing, I still think, Sorry, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, I think people, again, there's a lot of, the language gets in the way, and I seem to have really honed in or work in this area of feelings, not emotions, but the interpretation, non-language, this feeling. And one of my clients has taken this idea of the feeling in the body and uses it when applying it into other areas now. When on a phone call with someone, having that visual of that feeling inside and paying attention to how it's changing on a phone call. So it doesn't always have to have words.
Yeah, it's true. And like that feeling pops up at different different stages of our lives, I think. I want to talk about this for a second, because you mentioned a couple of clients that kind of just turned 50 or facing turning 50 or perhaps facing end of life. I also had a few clients lately who either were around that 50 age. I have one who just kind of has this quarter life crisis thing at 25. Somebody who recently turned 30, and there's this reminder of an ending, or like this reminder of time passing. It doesn't have to be death or endings, but it's like, oh wow, look, like all of a sudden the last 10 years flew by. But like, that seems to be such a significant time when people seek out these existential questions, or they pop up.
Yeah.
You know, and I wonder what that's like for you, because you mentioned there were a few people now who were like either facing end of life stuff or had these powerful reminders of time passing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that partly there's an internal and an external. You know, obviously our relationship with other people. Because I do think one of my clients, a London-based person, for instance, who really felt that their life wasn't where it should be because of the people around them had achieved this and they achieved that. So there's an external influence around time passing that is about what the Joneses are doing. You know,
and we always compare ourselves.
You always compare ourselves. Well, so and so was doing this by this age, and now what have I done? You know, so I think that is the biggest thing.
It's so difficult to own your own life, because this is one of the paradoxes in existentialism, right? We want to live our own lives and be the owner of our lives and have our autonomy and make our own decisions.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we feel much more comfortable in a way that when we fit in and we're doing things like everybody else does.
Yeah.
But we don't feel more comfortable because we want both at the same time.
Yeah, and
that's the paradox, right?
It is.
We want to fit in and we want to do our own thing.
Yeah.
And we can't have it both.
You can.
Can we?
I think we do all the time. I think that's the crux of existentialism, is dealing with all these tensions all the time. So one day you're happy to be doing what everyone else is doing, and then for some reason you step out of the bubble, the matrix, and you realize you don't want to do it.
But then how do you pick a career? How do you decide on a 3-year course?
Well, I think you feel your way to the answer.
But I think this is the existential paradox. Like, we cannot be fully comfortable with any of these decisions.
No.
You know, just because we have to make choices, we have to commit to something. You know, oh, well, there's plenty of people who don't commit to anything, but I don't think it's a particularly good life.
I think this is another element we haven't tapped on, and I've worked a lot with my clients on this, is trusting yourself. Because I do think that we can, and again, to me it goes back to identity and who are we, and knowing ourselves, because...
Trust yourself to do what?
That when you've made a decision, that it's not even that, it's like trusting yourself to, when you feel this way, what does this mean? So the next time you feel that, the first time it's going to be uncomfortable, and you can say, oh, you know, I used to go to this meeting all the time, and every time I walked in a meeting with this person, my stomach would just knot up. And I didn't know what it was. So it used to make me, you know, have anxiety and these things.
With like a boss or a colleague or something?
Yeah. It was a senior person.
Right.
Not a boss, but a very senior person. Very hard. And I used to just, a knot used to tighten up in my stomach. And then I didn't know what it was. And each time I started to become aware of what it was. First it was understanding why I was having it, paying attention to when it was having. All these little things that I'm doing builds trust. We begin to see our own patterns. We begin to understand our own selves. We begin, and so when you make a decision, you've sort of understood why you've made that decision. And then it can build this deeper level of trust. But
trust, when I hear trust, I always think trust for an outcome or for a certain future,
Trust.
or trust that the decision is right, or like there always seems to be this trust seems to have a connection to the future.
Is it? I don't see trust that way. That's so funny.
Like you can trust me not to betray you, or you can trust me
Maybe it's
that my answer is gonna serve you, or
Maybe
you can
it's
trust me I'm not
confidence.
gonna screw you up.
Maybe it's confidence, but it's also trust, because I think that
Confidence is the same thing, right? You can be confident in your abilities to achieve something, or
yeah, I don't know. For me, I've always interpreted it as trust. I can trust. When I moved to this country, you know, it was really scary. It was very scary because I was older. It was lots of reasons. But I had done these jumps so many times before then that I trusted myself that no matter how bad it was going to get, I had built up this level of confidence. But yet my confidence was shattered when I got here.
so then trust and confidence that you can
But that
continue, or that it's gonna be okay.
It's going to be okay. I don't know.
Again, there's this future in there, you know.
It is future, but I think that that's the missing part about when we go to make a decision in the present. If we've developed a pattern, understand ourselves, then we can trust ourselves to make a decision.
See, this is where I think existentialism has really something to offer. Because in that kind of view, there is no really a right or wrong, because like everything just is.
It is.
You know, and you'll never find out whether it's going to be a better decision or a worse decision, and by whose standards anyway.
Yeah.
You know, some things are like very clear, perhaps if you make a certain decision and you're either going to be on time or not.
Yeah.
You know, but when it comes to moving to a different country,
when it comes
you cannot
to
say I
your
wish I would have
job,
taken the bus. You
leaving
know,
your
it's
job.
like, yeah, because you don't know how it would have been if you stayed, and you don't know how it would have been if you left, if you stay. So there's like at some point decisions they're just different. You know, it's just not that one is better than the other. They're just different.
And I think that the trust element has also a part to play in, I don't know if we can mitigate regret, but, you know, if you made a decision you feel later on that you wish you hadn't have done that. I don't do that because I trusted myself at that point.
Yeah, if you have that trust.
If I have that trust.
But don't you sometimes doubt it when you're in like a bad place based
I
on
do
the
doubt
decision
it.
that you've made?
Yeah, and that's why I think kind of the confidence comes in and out. But trust is deeper in my mind. I don't know. This is just the words I use to describe it. I'm sure in maybe psychology or, you know, the academic research-based.
No, I think it's clear what you're describing. You know, that sense of, I don't know, confidence or esteem or trust or like that belief that you make something, you do something, and like...
No matter how bad it's going to get.
You're going forward with it.
I'm going forward. And I made this decision. But I think it builds up. And that's where I work with my clients with the phenomenological inquiry and why I think it's so important to experience ourselves and how do we understand our triggers, how do we react, how do we be true and authentic, you know, as we can in that moment.
You mentioned the phenomenological method a couple of times. I just wanted to like explain, because not everybody is familiar with that term. It's really, in very crude terms, it really means to tune in to an experience or a phenomenon without judging.
Without judging.
You're just describing, you're taking everything at face value, you know, you horizontalize, you take everything that somebody says and you don't give anything more weight than another thing. And you're just exploring what's happening there.
And for me it's just describing. Describe how it feels. Describe how intense, how... what emotions will come up, and it's purely, you know, it's a very reflective process because I think it allows the client to
put the meanings on there later.
To put the meaning to it, to see it, to make this mental, visual feel. You know, sometimes it's a visual feeling. It doesn't have words. I try to get away from words.
Yeah, it's so amazing how this is such a good skill to acquire, you know, because we do that all the time. Like, these interpretations and these, we jump to conclusions so quickly as human beings, which is a great skill to have, because it helps us make sense of the world very, very quickly. But like to be able to bracket it, to put it in our little box next to us, put the lid on, and really listen, because we cannot really listen if we constantly interpret and judge what somebody else is saying.
And for them to not judge it.
To help them not judge it, at least for the time being.
We're going to look at it.
And that allows different experiences and emotions to surface. And once they're on the surface, then you can start working with it.
Then they leave with it. Because then that's when the rest of the work happens. Is after we put it all out there, then...
And often that's where your answers are, right?
Yeah.
Because like you had all of these pre-interpreted, pre-judged answers that you put on whatever you're experiencing. And if you cut all of that crap and put it in a box and really tune into the feeling, then out emerges an answer quite often. And that's such a beautiful process. It seems so simple, but it's not.
No. I mean, this is one of, and I said to you in one of our supervision that and reflection and being silent, is my most powerful. My clients might talk for 30 minutes without me saying anything. And just...
How often do we have that space where somebody just listens for half an hour, right?
We never. Not even with our partners, really.
Oh, depends on the partner.
Well, your partner is another...
Oh, my partner wouldn't get half an hour of silence.
So, but I think that people crave that. And it's so powerful.
And talking of my partner, like I wanted, another topic that we wanted to talk about was like big life decisions, right?
Yes.
And I think that's something that I hear quite a lot, not just in my coaching, but also from friends, also from like what you just hear on the street. Like friends, colleagues, family, like there's so many big life decisions, and I'm getting married next month, so that is a big life decision. But the real big life decision for me was to ask her to marry me, which was for me that's where I went through all of my processes of like, oh my God, what am I committing to? Having children, leaving a relationship, breaking up with somebody. I had a client who was considering divorce, so changing job, switching career, what am I going to study? Which school do I send my kid to? Like, there's so many of these questions that potentially have a huge influence on the rest of your life. Moving into a different country. What a huge life decision. And your life will be completely different if you do that than if you do something else. Or you not do it. So there's so much anxiety around that,
What
right?
enabled you to make that, then to ask if that was where your attention was? What helped you?
So part of it was looking at how could my life be like. Like part of it was rational, like what would my life be like if I do it? And what would my life be like if I don't do it? A very powerful moment I've had when I've talked to somebody who I could imagine myself as if I don't commit to a big relationship. That would mean, because a relationship makes your life more complex. It doesn't make your life easier. So many people think they're looking for a partner because it would make their life easier. They would be less alone, and they would have somebody that could stop chasing the girls or the guys. That sense of belonging. But really, it's constant work you put into a relationship, and you're not just on your own anymore. You don't just make decisions for yourself anymore. You always have to consider somebody else with like all of the decisions that you make. So somebody told me...
It's like having a co-pilot.
I talked to somebody in a bar in Mexico City at some point, and I asked him, like, just as a friend of Nelly's, and I asked him, it's like, hey, what are you into? And this guy's like, oh, I'm into this, and I'm into this, I'm into religion. And it's like, oh, that's really interesting, because you don't hear somebody, like, just kind of mention as the stuff that they're passionate about. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. For me, it seemed like religion was always... like organized religion seemed to provide answers for the unanswerable question, to kind of provide some more comfort and certainty for people's lives. And he's like, oh, that's really interesting. I don't really see it that way. For me, it always added a level of complexity, because you're now in relationship with somebody else, just that somebody's not a person, it's a deity.
Yeah.
You know, so that makes my
That
life
was a
more
whole
complex
Yeah.
rather than easier with simple answers. And I'm like, that was so good. It's kind of reformed my view on religion. I'm myself not religious, following doctrine, but like that idea, that relationship, that personal
Yeah.
relationship to a God is the same commitment than a relationship to another human being.
Yeah.
You know, because like, yeah, it's gonna require work. You're gonna need to move forward, and that kind of commitment that is difficult to break. You know, with a God, I'm not sure. I didn't have that kind of experience, but like, some people just get out of a marriage. They just get divorced.
Yeah.
If you have children, it's a completely different ballgame.
Yeah.
You know, if you just had a massive ceremony with all of your friends and family, you don't wanna just get out of that relationship anymore, because like, what is your word and your commitment worth when you just get divorced like that?
Yeah.
You know, how does it affect your personal integrity? And like, also, you might have invested a lot of time and effort and money into a ceremony. So kids, they don't just go away. You can't just divorce them.
No.
You know, even though some people just leave.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, it's emotionally really difficult.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's so interesting how different levels of commitment freak people out.
Yeah.
Because you're committing to a certain path. I've committed to a certain path. And for me, what helped me was to first of all picture it, then also think about, would I regret it if I don't do this now?
Yeah.
Because a lot of the
Regret
times
is
we're
a
just
good thing.
scared, right?
Yeah.
You're
it's
just
the
scared
fear.
to commit. Especially if it's a person, you're like, well, I'm never going to meet anybody that amazing ever again.
It's interesting.
But maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. You don't know.
Now, what did you have a feeling about it? I mean,
Yeah.
What was your feeling about
I think that was the main driver, but at the same time, I knew that I can't fully trust the feeling.
Well, what was the feeling?
The feeling was, this is right. This is absolutely right. And very early on from...
So it was sort of balancing that feeling versus this mental exercise of where seeing it in the future.
Yeah, I mean, you meet
and
somebody...
where your life would be with or without it.
Yeah, so that there's a rational element to it, but also there's I don't know, I think the first 6 months you can't really trust yourself when it comes to romantic partners.
No.
Because you have these rose-tinted glasses on and they completely distort how you perceive somebody.
Yeah.
Then at some point you can start getting somewhere, and we're both psychologists, so we had very deep conversations about who we are and being quite open and putting yourselves out there. Not everybody's like that. Many people play a game and hold up a facade because they're scared that somebody else might stop liking them.
Yeah.
You know, so it's difficult to trust our feelings and intuition in that sense.
Well, that's why when I talk about trust, it's unpicking why you don't trust yourself. Unpicking all of that so you can trust yourself. So again, it's unpicking.
Yes,
all
that's
those
why
things.
Yalom in one of his books he called the Love's Executioner.
Oh, you did tell me about that. That's one of the I remember.
And that's one of the stories where he was basically the executioner of love for somebody who was addicted to love. They were so irrationally in love with somebody who didn't want to have anything to do with them.
Yeah.
And their whole life was an obsession about this person that, you know, they were in love with, and they knew they belonged together. But you kind of had to destroy and execute that sense of positive illusion so that you can see the world as it is.
As it is, yeah. Oh.
And that's difficult, so our intuition is difficult. Like, for example, if we flip a coin 9 times and it's always
Well,
heads.
it's interesting you call it intuition, though.
Isn't that feeling, that like
I
that
don't
experience,
know.
that
I don't know.
gut
I
that
don't
tells
know
you?
if it is. I don't know. So many different words.
So when I say intuition, what I mean is clever experiments of like, if we flip a coin 9 times and it's always heads, and then you let people bet on the next outcome, the bet would be more towards tails because it's been 9 times heads in a row. This time it surely is more likely that it's going to be tails, but it's not. It's always 50-50.
Yeah.
But our intuition tells us it's now more likely that it's going to be tails.
Yeah. I guess I think of that feeling from trust, and again, a building up from a pattern of our lives, sort of the collectiveness of our lives. Anyways, it's funny that I don't think of it as intuition, but it could be. So for you, it was balancing that feeling.
So I had a certain
With the
certainty.
rational.
You know, I had a feeling that this is right because it feels right. but it also rationally ticks like pretty much all of the boxes that I have. If I hadn't really thought about the boxes of a partner to tick because I didn't really want to think that way. But if you're forced to kind of look at it because you're thinking about making a really big decision, you kind of want to be sure. Some people make big decisions like that. Let's just get married. I'm quite an introvert, so I think about things a lot. So I'm like, yeah, but in the end, you cannot know. You know, I would have lived, what I knew is I would have lived a very different life if I hadn't committed to that.
Yeah.
You know, because that would be just very different. I'm not sure if it would be better or worse. I mean, part of me really wants to believe this is the best life that I could have possibly lived, and it feels that way.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it feels like I'm making all the right decision. But I also know philosophically there are hundreds of other lives that I could have lived if I made different decisions, even now.
Well, it's like when I left my job, you know, it's only natural to see people that were there when you were there and where they are, you know, in the organization, and you think, oh, I could have been such and such and had this title. And,
I know.
And
imagine where you could have been if you had left Pfizer.
Yeah.
Maybe depressed in your bed, not living with yourself,
well,
or maybe incredibly rich and happy.
It's interesting. I don't normally. I don't do that rational in that way.
I don't do rational.
No, I mean, in that same way, you know. So it's really interesting. I mean, I guess I do, but for me, it's there is a rational element. I was an engineering student for 3 years, almost completed a degree in engineering, got a degree in finance. I'm very analytical and looking at things and weighing risks and stuff like that. So for me, it's about...
So you have the rational side,
yeah, very much, yeah. But when I go to make my final decision, it's about that trust. Like, because my partner and I, when we got...
What if your trust tells you to make an irrational decision?
It's not irrational then. I don't know.
What if you thought about it rationally with your engineering hat on, and you came to the conclusion that this is not a smart thing to do, but your intuition just tells you that you should do that?
I don't know. I tend to err on the side of... I don't like to use the word intuition, but my sense of... The sense where I am at that moment in my life.
Yeah.
You know, what does this mean? It's more about meaning, making meaning of where I am in that present moment at that time.
I think it shows up in love all the time, right? I mean, I can remember a time in my past when I just got out of school. I had fallen for this girl and I kept pursuing her, and after she broke my heart like 2 times, I still pursued her, and I'm like, what am I doing? And my friends were like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, just stop.
Yeah, I mean, we've all had that sort of...
And you should.
Yeah. I mean, there was somebody from a long time ago in my past that I was obsessed with, this person. And there is that irrational, but that's not me either. Because I hardly ever do irrational things. But no,
You're quite lucky then.
I don't.
There's plenty of people who do plenty of irrational things for emotional reasons. I mean, hell, people want to build a wall, and people have voted for Brexit.
Oh, yeah.
That wasn't a rational thing. That wasn't a very much an emotional thing. That came from people's sense.
Yeah. But that's why, again, I go back to the trusting of that sense.
Yeah, but there's so many people who trusted their sense to vote Brexit.
Yeah, yeah. But those were fears.
They trusted their sense to vote Trump.
This is the other thing, is trusting their sense is detangling all those things around it, detaching it, looking at that fear, looking at that sense of who you are, looking at all those things. So what you're left with, you know, you can... this is my own concoction, but I do think, you know, this is what existentialism is really all about, is looking at these bits and pieces of your experience, your bad experiences in childhood, and what fears they have left you with, your all the things that you've experienced, and then you have this thing inside of that.
So you need to unpick that sense. You can't just go with your first sense and air it.
No.
There's a process of exploration. Maybe that's why the UK and the US are in this political existential crisis.
Yeah, it's a mess.
Because they hadn't really unpicked that, and I see that a lot when I talk to conservatives, like the extreme end of the conservatives. So kind of once I start, I like the debate and I like challenging people and their views. I like to understand how they do things that for me seem completely irrational and illogical and like just bad for yourself and everybody else.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, what's going on in your head? I'd like to understand. And then it seems that there's this level of living in an illusion, you know, of like somebody has presented them with a fantasy and giving them an experience that they hadn't bothered to or haven't had the opportunity to challenge and to explore in this kind of way. You know,
Yeah.
so people seem to like the simple solutions. You know, there's this meme of like, you know, simple but wrong answers to the left, and there's a huge queue, and then it's like complicated answers, but more to. And people like simple stuff. People like simple solutions. People don't have the time, and many people don't like to think so much.
And
you
I
know,
think,
and if you offer them an easy answer, oh, it's the immigrants' faults, then they kind of jump to that. And if they get like 2 arguments of like cherry-picked studies that support your case in some way, then people just eat that up and form an opinion based on that. And it seems lazy, but that's the only way I can explain how so many people make these emotional decisions.
Well, this is the other thing is, in my opinion, that just 2 things going on here. Is like you said, we haven't unpicked these things. In the U.S., you know, it comes from a country that had slaves. It has not dealt with these things, these fears that have been passed on generation. Trump comes along now, and we haven't talked about those things. Now, who are we? Can we trust who we are? Because we haven't talked about this big, huge thing over here. And so now we're in the midst of an existential crisis, because who we thought we are, we aren't. You know, I was one of the people stayed up all night when Trump got elected and thought, this isn't the country that I thought I knew, you know. Brexit hit me more here because I'm an immigrant. And I was almost ready to go back to the U.S. You know, Obama was still president. And I just, it really, so who we think we are can't be trusted until we've picked apart these fears. And I think the fear itself is what you've studied psychology, that when we have fear, we don't think rationally anymore. It shuts down that part of the brain that doesn't think logically. It kicks in. I did an article about this, about Barbecue Becky.
Barbecue Becky?
Yeah, did you hear? In the ice, I called him the Iceman. In the U.S., there was a woman a white woman who went up to a black family. They were barbecuing in the park. Perhaps, I don't remember all the details, not in an area that they were supposed to be barbecuing. So she took it upon herself to tell them, and she was calling the police on them and threatening them. And what's happening in the U.S. is more and more, you know, white people are taking it upon themselves to police the country, you know, and they see it's their responsibility to do that. And so when you sort of unpick all that, the fear-mongering that's going on all the time is increasing people's levels of fear. And when we're in fear, then the primordial instincts, the primitive instincts kick in, especially when we think our areas being our way of life is being threatened. And in both cases, in the U.S. and in the U.K., people's fears were increased, and their way of life, as they perceived, was being threatened. Which means the third thing, rational thinking, was gone. And so we can't rationalize it until we start to decrease the levels of fear.
Deal with our emotions, right?
Deal with that big chunk of fear.
Yeah, and it happens so often. Like, I mean, even there's some sales strategies out there that they like make you scared that you can't live the life you wanted, or you're missing out on the deal if you don't respond within like 24 hours or something.
I read Start With Why. He talks about that so much, about fear sells.
You put fear out there, and then people make emotional decisions. And if you set up the process right, then people do what you want. So.
And that's why the job of politicians, not even politicians, our job as individuals, our responsibility is to check our level of fear. whenever whether it's voting, whether it's making a decision, especially big decisions, going
I wonder
back
why
to
that doesn't
big
happen
life.
with climate change. Because like there should be so much fear around it, and yet people don't make those kind of emotional decisions.
No, that's a good one. I mean, I think there are some people that do, certainly. My husband's one of them. I mean, he's a biologist, so it's very important to us, but maybe it's just too big. People can't, the earth is going to be gone. It's hard to imagine. It's just like when Brian Cox does a special on BBC and he starts talking about galaxies and billions of this and millions of that. My head just explodes because I can't imagine it.
It's difficult to imagine.
It's so big that I can't imagine the earth not being here.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw Brian Cox on Joe Rogan the other week, and it was just the first half hour was such a mind-blowing trip, because I know this, and I've experienced it once when I imagine, but then you forget about it again. You kind of, unless it's the same thing with death, like endings, like we don't really think about it. So sitting down and like dedicating some time to zoom out massively and realize how little we actually are, and what a tiny little place this earth thing is, and then on earth what tiny little place this room or this city or this community is.
And from our perspective, it's everything.
I know.
That
and like,
tiny little speck is everything.
Exactly, because we're wired that way as human beings. But this is the other thing, like, that really helps to make those huge decisions, because they're really, really, really tiny decisions if you think about it from that perspective.
Yes, but from the zooming in, it's everything.
Yeah, but like it helps to think that nobody on the third moon of Jupiter is gonna ever care about anything that I do ever.
And most people won't care after 10 minutes on social media. It's gone.
Most people really couldn't care less about you.
No.
Or the decisions that you make.
It's sad.
I mean, if you're the Jeff Bezos kind of character, then people care a lot more about what decisions you make.
Yeah.
But not anybody who's in a different universe.
Yeah.
Even if you managed somehow to get the Earth out of its orbit, and like you screw up a whole part of the universe and some planet ends up in the sun because of a decision that you've made at NASA. Even that wouldn't matter to what Brian Cox describes as like the outer rims of what we know.
Watching Brian Cox is like having those like a lolly. What do you call them? Lollies here. It's like you brain freeze. You're licking and you're eating it, and you can get it on with it for a few minutes, but after a while, your brain just like can't handle. And that's why I think it comes like with the question you asked about climate change. It's just too big. It's too big.
But then it's also pretty small if you ask Brian Cox and like change your perspective. But like I think this really helps in terms of existential work. It is quite intuitive to think, if there is meaninglessness as part of the human condition, if maybe there isn't an overarching plan or a destiny or something like that, maybe like how can we make these big decisions, or even if everything is connected, how can I possibly make this decision if it could affect so many other things? If you actually manage to switch that perspective and think for a second, actually none of which I do really matters, then it makes it a lot easier to make decisions. Because we don't take so much responsibility.
And also knowing that whatever decision you do make, in the end, you're going to change your mind anyways at some point in the future, because every change is inevitable. How you feel today, and you're committed and you're ready to take responsibility for it today, in 1 year's time, 5 years' time, whether it's marriage, sadly, we change as people, whether it's a job. At first I always said I'm not doing any job more than 10 years. Now it's sort of like, I always do existential coaching, because it's just who I breathe it. It's so different. But it's not the only thing I want to do. And then, when I worked at Pfizer, I said I just wanted to do that. Originally, I thought I'll be there till I retire. And then 10 years came, I was like, and then I had my business 10 years. And then I just think that we have to also recognize that whatever decision, whether it's big or small, that we are going to change. Our views are going to change, our worldview, our circumstances, all these other things are changing. And not to sweat it so much. You know?
Yeah, this kind of lightness. To adopt that. I mean, it's difficult to just choose that, but in that process of exploration, you might be able to choose a certain lightness in going through life.
You can sit with it better.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things people used to always ask me when I first moved here is, first they asked me why, and that used to get me all the time, especially in the very beginning. Then the second thing is, the very next question is, would you ever move back to the States? And it used to be so hard to answer in the beginning, but I don't know, you know, and that's the truth. Yeah. You know, and I don't try to figure it out. I don't, I used to have a life plan. I used to have to know, you know, turning 50 coming up is hitting some triggers for me. But that's only because I have some unresolved issues in my life. Well, that I want to have resolved by then. But if it's not resolved, I'm going to keep...
Know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean...
This is so difficult to live with a not knowing. And I think this is, again, something that existentialism offers. If you offering not knowing as an inevitability of living, of being human, you know, if we weren't human, maybe we could know everything. But really, if we knew everything, life would be fucking boring.
You always say it would be.
We actually enjoy not knowing. That's why most people don't read the last page of the book first. And they don't want to know the outcome of the football when they go to see the game. You know, because we kind of enjoy the excitement of it. Life wouldn't be exciting.
That journey.
But excitement is also anxiety.
Yeah.
So embracing the not knowing, the uncertainty, as something that makes life exciting can really help to sit with not knowing stuff. You know, but then there's so many people who would rather like to know because it would be more comfortable. Really, once you understood that knowing everything is actually much more uncomfortable because you're lacking all of the excitement and life would be boring.
Yeah, it's like never going on a roller coaster again.
Yeah, or like never having really to make any decisions because you know everything. Like, I mean, you still make decisions, but you never have any excitement.
Yeah.
Like that nervousness, you're gonna miss it. That anxiety of like, I'm
makes
not sure
you
how
feel alive.
Yeah, all the great stories like that I know, all of my favorite movies, all of my favorite books, they all have this arc, this story arc of not knowing, of like a life and death situation, or somebody having to make a decision, not quite sure where it's gonna go. That like suspense of not knowing. If we didn't have that, I don't think life would be worth living. I think it would be a completely different experience and it would be quite blunt. You know, not blunt, bland.
Bland,
Yeah. It helped me to appreciate whenever I'm now in a situation where I'm like, I'm not quite sure how this is gonna go. I'm not sure if that was the right decision. It's like, well, that's just appreciated as part of being human and existence. That's try to appreciate it as excitement rather than anxiety.
Yeah,
you know,
reframing it.
And stepping out of a 4 days a week job that was secure, that like,
because of course you just did that.
Exactly. So in October I stepped out of like something that gave me a title and it gave me a monthly income and it gave me a reputation, and it's like to leave that behind because I felt I wanted to do something that I'm more passionate about, growing the existential profile, doing more of my own thing, not doing so much admin. Not working so much for other people, working more for myself. Doing more varied things in different areas rather than focusing too much on one thing. That was a huge step. And I left a lot of certainty behind and I created a lot of anxiety. And like I felt I had to walk my talk, but also I knew that this would be one of those decisions that I look back on and say, I don't regret that. I think it would have been more likely that I regretted it to stay in my comfort zone. You know, and there's this question whether in order to grow we have to leave our comfort zone. You know, it's like that's where the magic happens is outside of your comfort zone, and the thing that you're most scared of is probably the thing you need to do when it comes to your business or your life decisions.
As soon as you say I'm never that is like...
That's what I want to question as well right now here.
Yeah, I mean, that is... As soon as I say I'm never going to do that, and I had a few of them in my life. I'm never going to have only one child. Because I was the only child with my mother. And guess what? I have one child. And there was a couple other nevers I said I was going to do. And I've done them all. And it's like, that's a surefire way. Because there's a fear behind that.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you can grow is to deal with that fear.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it.
No.
You know, but it's useful to have a look at that.
Yeah.
You know, like not everything you're scared of you should do. If you meet a lion out in the street, maybe you
No.
shouldn't go and say hello. But
And I would never go bungee jumping. I mean, that's just something physically.
oh, I would definitely want to go
I
bungee
know,
jumping.
but I'm not afraid to take some big risks.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to take that one.
You know, there's close to zero risk with bungee jumping.
I know, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. No, I don't like heights, no. No, I don't know.
Yeah, but that's that change thing, and the question that came up for me recently, I've seen an Alan Watts video where he was describing this this kind of, I forgot how you call the flowers that you can blow, and you blow up the leaves and it like travels through the wind.
They're not dandelion. They're.
I think so, yeah.
Are they dandelion seeds or yeah?
Yeah. So he used it as a metaphor for like, this is really clever nature, because it uses the wind to fly. It doesn't have to use any of its own energy.
Yeah.
So it's like there's a change happening, there's a process happening, but they don't have to invest any energy.
Yeah.
It's like you can paddle your boat, or you can set a sail.
Yeah.
If you set a sail, actually you float effortlessly.
Yeah.
So you change something, you change your position without putting your own effort
And
in.
I think that's where I am now for the first time in my life. You know, when I sort of went into coaching, is that it was the first time I didn't have, you know, my eyes set on a specific thing. And probably why I'm still gravitating towards existential coaching, because it is about being comfortable with the unknown and the uncertainty.
Yeah, and if we can develop that attitude, that mindset, like,
but not every day. We don't always have to every day. That's the other thing, though, because I think that sometimes, especially as I do see coaches, you know, you can be happy and really promoting, and I don't think you can every day have, you know, feel comfortable with the uncomfortableness.
I don't think you need to seek out feeling uncomfortable. I think when it happens, don't avoid it. But like when you have those moments of bliss, you don't need to go out of your way to like, well, wait a second, I'm happy, or let's look a little bit deeper into the void.
I mean, like, I say that, like, I say I'm comfortable with uncomfortableness.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I feel that every day.
I see.
You know, it's like my overall.
Yeah.
But some days I want to scream.
Yes.
And I hate it, and I, you know.
Yeah.
And.
I don't think it's getting to a feeling of being comfortable with discomfort, because I think that's an oxymoron.
Yeah.
I think the way
I
see
mean,
it,
the uncertainty of it.
The way I see it, I don't think we can be comfortable with uncertainty. I don't think that works together. Like the way I see it is like that you value, you embrace something that is uncomfortable. It doesn't mean that it feels good, but you value it, so you allow it to experience it.
Yeah, it has a purpose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Doesn't mean we have to like it.
It doesn't mean we have to. Well, it doesn't mean we have to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because I like it, but I don't
enjoy it. That's true. Yeah.
It's like exercise. Like if it's not the kind of fun exercise that you have fun doing while you're doing it, it's actually hard work.
Yeah.
But like you value it because it gives you all of these benefits and a great feeling afterwards. You know, so while you're working hard on something and you really have to invest a lot of energy, you might not like enjoy it.
Yeah.
But you value it, you appreciate it, and you're doing it for that reason. You know?
Yeah. That's what I was thinking on my way here, is if we were to compare existential coaching to a form of exercise. Now, I haven't done lots of different exercises. I've only done a few different things. But I would say it reminds me of Pilates. Because in Pilates is all about the core. Strengthening the core so that you can pick yourself up, you know, lift yourself up so you stand upright. Because the core is integrated to everything else. You can go up the stairs better because your muscles are stronger. You know, in our class, when I take Pilates, there's a Zumba or some other class up above us, and they have blasting music, and they're jumping really hard, and you can hit them banging on the ceiling above us. And the Pilates instructor said that she said they're not jumping from their core. And I was like, shit, that is powerful. Because she did it too. She jumped up and she came down. Ballerinas jump from their core, and it's quiet when you jump from your core, because otherwise you're just impacting your joints. You're just jumping, and everything else is feeling the pain. And that's how I kind of think of existential coaching, is this idea that if we strengthen the core, I don't know how else to say it, the core of our existence, understanding that, everything else we do in life, I'm not gonna say it's gonna be easier, but it will be experienced differently.
Yeah, and I think there's a certain strength that's coming from the core. And core, like if you picture the Four Worlds model with Emmy van Dersens as like a sphere, then on the inside you would have that spiritual dimension, your belief system, your faith or your values, like the way you make sense of the world.
Yeah.
You know, and then you have a personal world, a psychological world, where it's your thoughts and your memories and the way you process stuff and the way you talk to yourself and your character strengths and your all of your characteristics, like the things that make you.
The belief that
on a mental level.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have the social level, how you connect with people, you know, how you relate to other people in your world, in your community, to the world at large, but on a social mid-world level. And then you have the relationship to your body, to your office, to your environment, like in the physical world. You know, so if you imagine people as that kind of sphere, your core would be your belief system and your faith and your values and the things that define you at a deeper level that we often don't really think about, but that influences everything that we do.
And the meaning that you have with your life, like how you, because it's purpose and meaning is also in that, like, so what is your reason for getting up today? You know,
I love that ikigai. The reason. I think it literally translates to something like reason for getting up.
Yeah, or there's that other one, the reason, if somebody, I can't remember, Sasha had the quote, I'm horrible with quotes, but there was something about if a man knows his reason, then, or knows his why. Is it Rollo May?
Well, it's both Frankl and Nietzsche.
Okay.
That both said, like, if you have a why to live for, you can endure almost anyhow.
And that's exactly it. And that's the core.
That's the core,
the
exactly.
why.
Yeah.
Why are you here?
Yeah.
And I think that's what existentialism gets us to contemplate that at a much more. I think we figured it out. I think at least it's broad enough. It helps us understand our whys.
I think the problem is that there's so many layers of whys that have been inscribed in us.
Yeah.
We grow up, and from very early on, we have all of these messages. First from our parents, then from the TV,
just taking
from
them
the
all
industrial advertising complex.
Yeah.
Like, there's all of our parents, our teachers tell us how to live, the philosophers tell us how to live, Oprah tells us how to live, scientists tell us how to live. Everybody tells you what a good life is.
But the meaning
and
that
how you
we
should
ascribe to it and the strength of that meaning, you know, so if thinking back against the Pilates, you know, and all we do is sit there and lift our legs, and it looks so easy. You know, it looks like you don't think you're doing much, but it's really working these muscles that you wouldn't even think you had.
That's the thing. Like, if you do a lot of Pilates, and then you would get into something else, you know, you might use different muscle groups that you hadn't really used before, and it hurts.
Yeah.
You know, it's easier to say in the human body, because it's much more of a science, that this is your core muscles that you use literally for everything else. In psychology also, you know, the values and the motivations and the belief system, that's also your core in a way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's a lot more complex, because you can redefine that core in different ways.
And that's what existentialism, I think, gets to the heart, is us making that for ourselves. our own reasons, based on our own life's experiences, based on detangling all the, as much as possible. We'll never be completely able to separate ourselves from our existence.
But that's the thing, we have a different set of muscles at the core.
Yeah.
So you have two people who both have an extremely strong core, and they do completely different things.
Yeah. But I mean, but in terms of what existential coaching does, it strengthens
that core, whatever that core looks like.
Whatever that core is it's getting us to work on that core and make our own meanings, so that no matter what else we do in our lives, whether it's going upstairs, that we have something that strengthens it.
The point I wanted to make is that it can be really difficult to figure out what your core is, because there's all of these messages, and they might be
and
different.
that's the whole thing of coaching does. Bless you. Is that's the whole, I think the whole crux, not crux, but the purpose.
To figure out what the real core is.
What the real core is, and to strengthen, or
But what if the core is both? You know, because these dilemmas are dilemmas because there's equally strong muscles that work against each other.
Yeah.
It's like the tale of the two wolves.
Yeah.
And it depends on which one you feed.
Yeah.
You know, because I think we all human beings have this greed and this love drive in them.
But that's part of the core.
Part of the core, but some feed the other one and some develop the other one more.
Yeah.
So some get more on the greed side, some get more on the love side, some are sometimes this, sometimes that. Existentially, we all have conflicting cores. We all have these different forces, and all of these forces, they clash all the time. So that's why we are conflicted beings at the core.
So we don't have a...
That's why it can be so depressing if you look deeply into existential philosophy, because what they will tell you is we are all deeply conflicted and it will never go away.
But that is what makes us, though.
Exactly, that's where the energy is created, right?
Yeah.
But it's difficult to hold it both and to appreciate that inner conflict as being human.
Yeah. Oh, I guess we don't have it then.
I don't think it is to be had.
No.
I think, for me, my personal view on this is like to grasp that this is happening in us, that we live with conflict just because we're human beings, and to embrace that. That's for me is the positive in existentialism. It's not that we can only develop this kind of core. It's like, no, you're always going to be conflicted, and appreciate that shit, because that's what makes you human. That's where a lot of the energy comes from.
But I think it's the focus is in that experience and understanding that experience, and I don't know.
I think the process of the experience is the excitement of exploring what it means to be human. Because there is no answer and there is no peaceful comfort, there is no thing to arrive at. There's just a continuous process of being human and making decisions and committing to things.
It's the process of continuing to work all those different things.
Yeah, I appreciate that shit. You know, that's what makes life exciting.
the leg lifts and the balancing on one leg and flipping your...
Well, if you never look at your core, you're gonna find yourself doing things that you don't understand, and then you don't feel really in charge of your life.
No.
The thing about coaching for me is that I want to help people be more in charge of where their life is going. And if you understand your core as a conflicted thing that produces a lot of energy because of all of these things that are in tension with each other, then you can appreciate, stop fighting the inevitable and make decisions even though you're in the face of not knowing.
Not knowing, I think I've reached my brain limit.
I was just about to say, like, I think that's a really good point to stop.
Yeah, I can't even see anymore. Like, with this talking. I think we almost went through everything too.
I think there's a few topics left, which I'm sure we can discuss another time. This will not be the last.
No, this is really good though. This was really, it was really. What do you think?
Well, right now I just say thank you, Marcy, for being here. If people want to know more about you, it's marcyboyer.com, right?
Yes.
MARCIE.
Yes.
BOYER.
Yes.
And I'll put that in the show notes as well.
Okay.
And Yeah, I would definitely recommend going on a journey with you if you are courageous and ready to go on that kind of journey. I think it's helpful to kind of lay that out. And for me, it was amazing just because so many things come up in real life that people go through, and I'd love to know from you guys if there's any other things that are present in your life and that you think, oh, that really triggered something and made me think about how I do this in this situation. Like, that's the whole idea, is to make existentialism more tangible and more applicable to everyday life. And I loved all of the stories that you've brought into this space. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's really lovely to talk with. Well, I wouldn't be an existential coach if it weren't for you, and introducing me to it, and Animus having the course. But it feels lonely sometimes because we don't really get to have. I don't, being by myself, not part of, say, an academic world or a specialized world. And so it is really thought-provoking to sort of cover some of these things, these bigger, asking ourselves the whys. And being open enough to change my mind, my thinking. So it's really helpful in that way. Awesome. Yeah, good.
Thank you very much, Marcy.
All right, thank you, Yannick. I know.